There are hundreds of shortcuts in Excel, but in today's video, we're going to look at the most popular and common ones that are going to save you time and increase your productivity. If you'd like to follow along, there is a file link in the description below, and if you want to move ahead to any of the videos, there are timestamps on this video too. Ready to take your Excel to the next level? Let's jump into it.
The first shortcuts that we're going to have a look at are for your sheet and your workbook. Now, to open a new workbook, it's Ctrl N, and to close is Ctrl W. So let's give that a go. Ctrl N, there you go. We've opened up a new workbook, and let's use Ctrl W to close up the workbook. Now you may want to scroll along through the sheets over here, and instead of clicking one by one through the sheet with your mouse, you need to use Ctrl PgUp to go one sheet along and Ctrl PgDown for the next sheets along. So now let's go backwards to page up and we'll head back to the beginning. Let's move on to navigation. So simple data table here, you may want to select more than one cell, and the way to do that is let's click onto the cell here. So we are on H6. Now we want to go hold down the shift key. Let's move to the right. So we have the right arrow. Let's go to the left, and that takes you back to the beginning cell. Let's move one place down, and let's go back to the beginning by going up one space and then move across. Now, the way you could use this is if you want to highlight 3 or 4 cells, so just keep holding the shift, pressing the down arrow, and now if we move left, we also highlight those. Now, if you move left again, you can have everything highlighted. If you want to select the whole data range, you simply go for shortcut number 6, which is Ctrl and A. That highlights the full dataset. To select all the cells that are not empty to either the left, the right, above and below, you hold down Ctrl and Shift, and simply with the arrows, let's go to the top. So that's the up arrow. We'll come back and go to the bottom. We can go left, and we can simply go right. Now, if we want to just not highlight, but we want to go to the end of the dataset, we just hold Control and we press the left arrow to go left to the last cell before an empty cell. And we can do Control and we can go towards the right, and similarly go to the bottom arrow and the top arrow. Now, if we come along here and we do Control right, so there you have some data on the column AB, where if you now hold Control and press the left arrow, you're going to come back to your data set here. Now you might be anywhere within the sheet and you might want to come back to the home, so press Control and Home, and that always takes you up to the A1 cell. Moving on to some simple entry into a cell. So let's move across to this cell here and let's type something in. Now, for example, if you don't want to enter that text or that number within the cell, all you need to do is press Escape, because right now nothing is actually within the cell unless you press Enter. So let's press Escape, and that will simply just remove all the entry that you've added into the cell. Now let's try a retype here. If you press Enter here, it accepts it into the cell, but it might just be that you want to then have and remain in the same cell. So to remain in the same cell, instead of pressing Enter, which moves you down a cell, you just hold the Control, you press Enter, and that actually keeps you within the same cell. Moving on to rows and columns. Now we're going to have a look at how to highlight rows for a start. So if we're going to highlight, let's say this row, we hold on to the shift and we press the space bar, and that highlights one row. If you want to highlight 2 rows, simply hold the shift as we looked at the previous shortcut. Hold the shift and we can just simply go to the bottom arrow and move down as we want to highlight. So let's say we have now highlighted a row. If we want to add another row here, so if we look at now number 17, we go to Ctrl, Shift and plus. That adds us a column, and if we want to remove that column, simply Ctrl minus shortcut number 16, and that removes the column that we've just added. Similarly, if we go across here, and now let's highlight the entire column, that's Ctrl space. Now if we want to add a column, Ctrl Shift and plus, and if we want to remove it, Ctrl minus. Moving on to cell formats. These are the most useful functions and shortcuts that you're going to be using in Excel. So let's get started. So we move on to number 18, which is copying a cell. Now go onto the cell that you want to copy and hit Ctrl C to copy it. Now when you see these lines that are highlighted along the box, it's copying the cell. If you don't see that, it's not copying the cell. Now let's move down to the cell. You can copy it to any other location that you want, and Ctrl V, and that simply copies over the cell. Now it remains in the memory of Excel, which means if you want to continue pasting it, you could continue pressing Ctrl V, Ctrl V, Ctrl V, as you see there. Moving on to simple formatting for cells. So let's say we have a text here and we want to make it italic. So Ctrl I to make it italic, and if you want to return, you do the same thing. Ctrl I makes it back to normal. So let's do once again, Ctrl I into italic. Now we want to make this bold, so we are controlling and pressing B, move down to the underline and Ctrl U. Now what we want to do is we want to repeat all the three functions here. So let's do Ctrl I, Ctrl B and Ctrl U. So now it's made it italic, bold, as well as underline. Now a very useful feature is the F4 button. What that does is repeat the last format. Now in this cell we've done three different formats, so we have italic, bold and underline, and what this is going to do is simply go to a different cell and repeat the last action, and the last action that we had in this cell was underline. And here F4, and you can see that it repeats the last action by underlining. Moving on to further shortcuts, let's go to 24. We're going to increase the font size and decrease the font size with this simple shortcut. So let's click onto the cell, Alt HFG, and once again Alt HFG, and it makes it slightly larger. Now let's go ahead and decrease the font size. So we go to Alt HFK, makes it smaller, Alt HFK makes it even smaller. Now we can move along to the coloring format. So number 26, it's going to open up the dialog box, Alt HH, it opens up the dialog box, and now we can choose any color that we want to shade our box. So there you go. You have a number of different options here. If you want a no fill, more colors, and any Pantone colors. So let's just make that green. Now, if you want to color fill and change the text of your cell, you go to Alt H, F and C. And once again, it opens up the dialog box and you can just highlight that into red. Moving on to cell alignments. Now, whether it's text or whether it's number, we want to have that in a different alignment within our cell. So we have aligning center, and the shortcut is Alt H, A and C. So as you can see, we are now to the center. To align left, it's Alt H, A, L for left. So we have that. Let's push this to the right, Alt H, A, R. Let's move it there. And the final one is middle. So Alt H, A, M, it brings it to the middle. So as you can see, you have a middle and a center in Excel, and what we're going to do is we're going to move this text to the center and the middle by using two of the shortcuts. So Alt H, A, C, Alt H, A, M, and there you have the text in the center as well as the middle. A couple of easier useful ones are a quick border, Control Shift and 7. And let's move there's the border. And if we want to add a comment within our cells, Shift and F2, and there you go. I have a comment here. Let's move on to number formats. Now, if we want to make the number into a currency with 2 decimals, all we do is Ctrl Shift and the $sign, and the currency that comes up is not necessarily dollar. It depends on what currency your Excel is set at, which depends on your Windows settings. Now, let's move to number 35, adding in a percentage. Once again, Ctrl Shift and percentage, and that simply turns the cell into a percentage. Control Shift and exclamation mark changes it into a number format with a comma for the 1000 separator as well as 2 decimals. So we have here the format of date, which if we use the Control Shift and hashtag, it shows 30th of August 2012, which makes no. Moving on to some very useful today's date formula. So if you just Control and semicolon, it returns the date of the day. There you go. And the current time, Control Shift and semicolon will return you the time. Once again, this depends on the settings that you have on Windows, so whether it's displaying in a UK format or US format or any other format that you have. Let's have a look at some common editing and features shortcuts in Excel. So if you want to have a look at certain text number within your data sets, all you need to do is Ctrl F. So let's do Ctrl F to find something. Opens up a dialog box, and we are going to look for me. So let's type in me and let's go to find next. And you can see that it's selected the box here. Now, what we could also do is we might want to change and replace some of the text. We might have had a spelling mistake, or we want to change certain text that's in our data. So simply Control H, and what we need to do is let's go and type in near, and we're going to replace it with here. So let's press replace, and there you go. You can see that the data here has changed. A useful feature as well in Excel is the Ctrl K, which hyperlinks, so you can link it in various different ways. So let's open up the dialog box, Ctrl K, and it gives you a number of different options. So we have existing places within the document, browse pages, you can even link an email address and any web page that you want. What we're going to do is we're going to link it to a place in this document, and we are going to link it to the cell J7. So let's type in J7 and press OK. And once we then click onto this, as you can see, it moves it across. Another one is going to a specific cell. So you might want to scroll down to your data set to either 10,000, 100, or any other cell or row within the set. So we are going to go and have a look how we can get down to cell D1000 without having to scroll all the way down. So Control G, and let's go type in D1000, press OK. And there you go. We are now down to the cell D1000. To go back up, Control and Home, and it brings you back all the way up to the top. And the last few that we're going to be having a look at is, let's try and remove this and add it somewhere else. So Control X will cut, so you have the same kind of detail here as you would with copy, but this time you're actually going to remove it and not just put it and copy into another cell. So Control X, and it works with another function. So if you press another cell and not move it across, it's not going to do anything. So let's go across here to H and Control V, and as you can see, you've done that. Now, if we want to just undo the last action, so removing it from here and putting it here, we use shortcut number 45. We're going to do Control Z to move it back, so Control Z comes back to the undo action, and if we want to redo the action, then Control Y to remove it back again. Here we'll look at very simple ones. So if we do Ctrl R, that's going to copy the cell to the left. And if we now use Ctrl D, that's also going to copy it from the above cell. There you go. If you want to edit the cell that you're actually in, instead of if you now type over this, it's going to overwrite it, but we want to add to it. So we go to F2 and edit me now. So you can simply just continue editing the cell that you were in. Lastly, I want to share the biggest and best shortcut that you're going to be using, and that is not to use any shortcuts or remember them. Simply, you need to go onto Alt, and Alt brings up all the options over here, so you don't need to memorize any of the shortcuts. All the shortcuts are going to be available in the quick access toolbar. So for example, if we go across to R for review, you can have a look, we have things there, and you can then go to Alt M to have a look at data sets. You can also have a look at view, review, developer. So as you can see, you have a whole number of keys here that you can use for your shortcuts.
Thank you for watching the video today, and if you've learned something, then please feel free to give us a like, and if you would like to have more content like this, then consider subscribing to the channel. Until next time, happy spreadsheeting.